So thanks for coming to Zoom 101. My name is Adam Pocious. I'm our academic technology director and also in charge of our client services here at CSU-Pueblo. So I work a lot with our multimedia implementations, our instructional technology, as well as our technicians that work on computers on site, and then just in general do a lot with anything that's forward-facing at the institution. So this webinar series is being hosted by our instructional technologist, Denise. So she's put together this really good mix of pedagogical sessions and then nuts and bolts sessions. We really felt moving forward that you can't just understand the tech without understanding the why. So a lot of these other sessions that are out there are also going to help you integrate with these tools a little bit more effectively, some engagement strategies, some ways that you can really think about leveraging tools in a different way than you may have thought before. One of the premier classes that we have is we have a self-paced course. It takes about 10 hours to do if you did the whole thing. But what that does is there's 3 modules that you can go through, and it's very pedagogical. So it's just going to talk about that, not very much in the tech. All the other tech that you're learning, all these other resources will complement that course. And again, that one you can sign up for. It's right on the front of Blackboard's login page. And you can click, and there's a link right there if you needed to jump into there, and I can show you those resources after this. But today we're going to talk about Zoom 101. I kind of queried you guys as to what you're looking for. It looks like a basic overview, some of the tools that you have in there. One of the things that's hard to demonstrate with Zoom is the interface of Zoom while you're in a Zoom, because you will need to have some screenshots there to articulate where that's at. So a lot of my presentation will be on screenshots, but feel free to raise your hand, ask a question as we go through here, and there'll be time at the end for additional questions. So one of the first things that's always asked is, how do I get a Zoom account? Where do I get my Zoom account? First thing you got to do is you can contact our help desk. I will put their number up at the end of this session, but you can just let them know that you need a Zoom account. That'll get you in the queue to get a fully licensed Zoom account from CSU-Pueblo. That would have to be built up through your email account. The reason for that is that if we start integrating with Blackboard, which is a step that we're looking to take, it will automatically be able to integrate, and as you record certain sessions, those sessions will also appear in your Blackboard course, so your course users can view your lectures. So right here is zoom.us. So our entry point in most of these slides today is just going to take the approach as though we're not integrated with Blackboard and you're just going to use Zoom as a default. So on this screen, you would be able to click on the My Account at the top and you'd be able to log in. It's your CSU-Pueblo username and then the password that you set up at the time you got your invite. So how we would do it is if you request it, we'll send an invite to that account. You click the link. You're able to set up Zoom, and then you'd be at this screen. We'd be able to log in and get going. Once you get into Zoom, there's going to be a lot of options in here, and I am not going to go through all the options just because I don't think that we need to go through every little nuance and detail. I'm going to go across the top of the ones that are going to be the most important as we go along. One of the things I like to point out is that you will have an option to put your picture there. So your picture will show when you do not have your video on and you are logged into your session. So that's just a nice way to let your other participants know who they may be talking to. If you have a picture of yourself, I have a nice little caricature I got at my last IT conference that I've thrown in there. And then there's going to be details about your account below. So it'll let you know if you're in a licensed account, what your meeting capacity is, your time zone, all the basic settings that you'd want for an account. I do suggest you go through there and ensure those are all set up. We're going to go to one of the most important buttons on the next screen, and that's your meetings button. So you'll notice on that left-hand side of the screen, there is a meetings button that once you click, you'll notice there's also a schedule a new meeting. It's a big blue button. That button is what's going to kick off our ability to create these different URLs. So the URL that you clicked, you may have got it through email or you saw it in our Google document. You click that to get in today's session. Those are unique and you can create those in various ways. The best way to do it is you click that schedule a new meeting button and it's going to ask you for some details. One of the first details is, okay, what is the topic? What are we going to call this? So good best practice could be the name of your course and the date that you're putting that course in if you're going to do this at a regular cadence. A little bit lower is going to be the date of when it's going to occur, the duration, the time zone, some of those different parameters. One of the things that I commonly get asked is, if I have a reoccurring meeting that's happening at different times, how do I make that happen? How does that work? So let me just jump in to my iteration of Zoom so we can just take a quick peek at that as we go forward before we go too far.
Adam, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said to contact the help desk to get an account. Do we have to do that every semester, or once you do it, you're good?
Right now, it's going to be it'll be good for now. The funding for Zoom it blew up. It was like a COVID response, so to speak, but I can't see us backing away from using Zoom in the future. So I'm looking at the sustainability efforts moving forward. So I do not think you're going to have to ask every semester. But what we do have is, we may downgrade the account if you're not teaching that semester, but you would still be part of the instance. And what that means is, there's a basic level and a license level. Basic level allows you to do 40-minute meetings as many times as you want, but at 40 minutes, it just closes the meeting. A license account gives you the entire duration, as long as you want to do it. You can do 24 hours if you like. So that allows you to just have a little bit more duration on the meetings, and then there are a few more tools that will pop up if you do have that license account. So for instance, let's say you went into the spring, you weren't going to teach in the spring or didn't need Zoom. It may just be taken to a basic level, but you still have the account. It still can be leveraged. And then maybe the next semester you teach, we can turn it to licensed again.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So as we go forward, I'm inside actual Zoom, so I can kind of click around right here. So if I were to schedule a new meeting and I click on this button here, it's going to give me all those things we're talking about. But notice down here, I have this recurring meeting button. I click on that, and you're going to have some options. How often will it reoccur? And at what dates? How many occurrences would you have? So you could potentially do it for 15 times, for instance. And you may do it daily, or maybe every week. So every week on Tuesday at this particular time, we would kick off one of these meetings. That's a great way to do it. What's nice is the link that gets generated would be the same across all of those meetings. So very helpful. But like I had mentioned before, what happens when you have maybe a class period that's on at 4 o'clock one day, but then 3 o'clock another, or just random? Well, one of the ways you can do that is go to the reoccurrence, and it's kind of hidden in here, and you click on no fixed time, and then everything disappears from that menu. And basically you're setting up a meeting link that has no duration, no expiration date. It's just a link that will exist in our system, and you can distribute that along the way. So this professional learning session has one link for every class that I'm facilitating throughout the workshops, for instance. So it's the same link consistently, and it's at a bunch of different times. So that's just a great way to be able to set up a link for a little bit longer duration as you go forward. All right, let me close some of these little meetings here. A couple extra open. All right, get back into the presentation. So once you save your meeting, you're going to get to a screen where it's just going to show all the details of what you set up in your meeting, and it's going to have your invite link sitting right in the middle. You can copy that link, send it to your different individuals, and they click that link and they'd be able to enter the thing just like you did today. Additionally, off to the right, you're going to notice that there is a copy invitation link. If you were able to click that, it brings up a whole invitation that not only gives you the link, it gives you the time, the duration, the title, and all the various phone numbers by location that you can call into. So that could be big, because sometimes you may just have to call in on a phone and you're not going to actually have a camera. So you can call from a landline into a Zoom. There have been times we've used Zoom as a complete conference bridge, and no people in there have any kind of video. Typically, though, you'll have the host that has the video and they're running it from a computer, and other people are dialing in various kind of ways. A little anecdote from this morning is we did a little breakout icebreaker, and we went around the room and people were just kind of describing what they had in their rooms, and somebody had their video off. Well, they turned it on and they were in the car. They were a passenger in the car driving, going to our thing. So the flexibility to be able to do that, it was really cool to be able to see that happen. Susan, did you have another question, or I just noticed your hand was raised before? Or that was from
no, I had raised it before I asked. That's fine. You answered it.
Gotcha. I cleared it out there. Okay, so once your meeting is created, it goes into a list. Your meetings will start just listing in here based off the date they're available. If they're reoccurring and don't have any time-based kind of restraints, they'll always be there. Previous meetings will migrate into your previous meetings. And then you have a thing called a personal meeting room. A personal meeting room is a lot different than what you would normally schedule a meeting. It's kind of like what we just talked about with our reoccurring meeting that would have no kind of time boundaries. What a personal meeting room and how I set mine up is I put it in my signature of all my emails. And what it does is if I needed to have a quick ad hoc meeting with anybody or office hours or some sort of consultation, I can just tell somebody, click the link in my signature line. And it would go to my personal meeting room. And then there's a thing called a waiting room. I actually have to allow them into the room. They don't just pop into my room. So I could be meeting with, let's say I'm consulting with a student and I see another student pop into my waiting room. They are not going to disturb my meeting until I allow them in and I dismiss this other student. So it's a really nice way to have like a long-standing room that you can just spin up and you tell people when you're going to be in your room. Somebody could click the link and they can be in your room or at least in the waiting room, but it'll never get into your official meeting unless you allow them in.
When somebody's sitting in your waiting room, is there a way for you to send them a message and say, I'll be done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes?
I believe you can chat to them, yes. There's a way that you can click next to their name and there's some additional tools that you can send off to them to allow them to happen. And there are some other options as well, but that's a good question. All right, so I'm going to go into some of my funny screenshots. Everything from this point forward will be screenshots of me pointing at various things that you can also look at some of them as you go along. So one of the first things that you're going to think about is we're going to look at that navigation bar that's at the very bottom of your Zoom. So it may be a little, you may have to increase the size of this and just put it full screen to see everything as we go through it. I'm not going to go through every item. I'm just going to talk about generalities of each space. What I'm pointing at right now is that I've clicked my mouse on a up arrow. That's to the left-hand side. It's on the very far left-hand side on the audio feature. And it opens up a list of audio devices. This is a thing that you're going to need to get used to doing, is that you can have multiple devices plugged into your computer. And there might be a time you start a Zoom, you start talking, and everyone's like, can't hear you, pointing to their ear, chatting that they can't hear you. And it may be because you've not selected the correct device. So you can get to those very quickly by hitting that little up arrow. So if you move your mouse around to display that navigation, you can go ahead and click that up arrow and you can see the various options that you have in there. So when you're on campus, it may be a little different than when you're at home because it's going to be listing the exact devices that you have available. The same thing is true for your video. So when you get to campus, if you're teaching from one of our Zoom enhanced classrooms, there are going to be two options. One of the option will be the normal webcam, and the second will be a doc cam. And you will need to be able to switch between the two if you're going to be doing some like doc cam work. So if you had a little sheet of paper that you're writing some equations on, or you're writing some concepts, drawing a picture, whatever that might be, you would have to be on the doc cam that's going to be facing towards a piece of paper. And then you would swap back to your other cam to be able to show your face or the classroom. Moving right along, you're going to go to a new security tab. Now, on some of your screens right now, you're participants in my meeting. I'm the host. So as a participant, you're not going to have everything that I have. It's going to be a little different. Hosts have different capabilities. So one of the issues that cropped up in about April is Zoom just blew up. The amount of users that was in the system was like from 10 million to 300 million. And so it really exposed some security flaws in their system as well. It was really more of a business-based system. It was getting into the higher education space. They have since fixed a lot of the big security implications that they had, and this is an example of what that is. But there was a time that something called Zoom bombing was a thing, where your Zoom was just open, people would jump in, share inappropriate things, say inappropriate things, and jump out. You really had no concept of who that person was. So they've done a lot more to lock down the URLs, to allow screen sharing to be locked down. So as of right now, no one would be able to screen share in this session until I allow it to happen. So you'd click the security tab, it would pop up and you see there's screen share, and I'd have to click that to allow you to screen share. There's also a lock meeting. Lock meeting notifies maybe somebody that might be in a waiting room if they're showing up late and you're like, you know what, we've gone too far. We're not going to allow anybody else in the meeting. If you lock the meeting, it would just tell the person on the other end, hey, you're not able to get into this meeting. It's already taken off. Moving right along, when you—
How do you get—
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. How do you get rid of somebody? Suppose somebody jumps in who has not been invited. How do you get rid of them out of your Zoom session?
Great question. And actually that goes right to the next slide. So you have a participants panel. So when you click on participants, you'll be able to see everyone that's in the session. Now mine in my screenshot just has myself, but typically you can look at your participants right now and you should see a few other names in there. So if you click on your participants, a window will pop up or a pop-up will appear and you'll be able to see a few of them. Well, on the host screen, what I'm able to do is highlight your name, and there is a way to really just remove you. You click on the name, you hit this more button and hit remove, and it just jettisons the person from the course. So that can be used when somebody is in the course that you don't want to be, or let's say you're in a consultation mode, you finished with the student and you want to quickly release that student, you just remove them and then bring the other person into the waiting room. So that participant screen tends to be a very handy tool to keep open and use as much as you can. It's also how you mute people. It's also how you could give somebody additional host privileges. You could send it to somebody else and give them that privilege. And at the very bottom as well, it has those nonverbal cues that we discussed a little earlier. At the very bottom of your participants panel as well, there is a little ellipse. I've already clicked it in the screenshot, but the ellipse shows en masse what you can do to everyone. You can ask everyone to mute or unmute and do all the different kind of tools from that menu on that bottom right-hand side. One of the other tools, the one that's right after participants, is polling. So polling is a really cool feature within Zoom, and this is where it's starting to get outside of the scope of it just being us looking at each other and us sharing our screens. Polling is just what you might expect. You're able to click into the poll. Now you can, I'm just gonna preface it with this. You could create poll questions long before you get into the Zoom and have those available as you start the Zoom, or you could ad hoc create a poll question because one comes up in the middle of conversation in class. In this instance of what you're seeing, I clicked on poll, I did not have one ready to go, and when I clicked on it, it would give me a screen. It would actually open a browser screen and say, okay, what do you want to put in this poll? And then you'd be able to answer the question and you'd see it happen. So just for the sake of this demo, let's do a quick poll. So I'm gonna create a poll right now, and everyone should have a window that pops up on their screen asking you a question. So if you want to go ahead and make your vote now. Looks like, and it tells me the duration has been about 12 seconds. There's 3 out of 4 people that have made their vote. 4 of 4 have done, so I now end the poll and I can share the results. So now the results are shared with the group. We can kind of take a look at this. If we need to relaunch the poll, we could. If there was more poll questions, we'd be able to move through those questions. Now you might ask, okay, you're seeing the anonymized poll results. What if I wanted to use it for quizzing or some other kind of like quick assessment? After the session is complete, you will be able to download the results and see the individuals that made certain questions. Now, if you're concerned about making it anonymous, you do have a checkbox to make it anonymous. Maybe it's not a question like a quiz question, but something that's a little bit more needed for anonymity, you can do that as well. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing those results and we're gonna continue on. So the next thing is chat. Chat is a good one to use, especially with synchronous kind of instruction. So if you imagine yourself in a classroom, maybe have some face-to-face students and then also some remote students, it's sometimes very hard for the remote students to jump in and ask a question, and especially if you mute everyone, it can be sometimes really kind of disorienting to have just this disembodied voice just jump into a question. I'll let you kind of figure out how you want to manage your class, but one of the more effective ways we've found is if you keep your chat open and then you have your shared screen or your screen off to the left-hand side, you're displaying it to everyone in the class. So as chats come up, some of your in-class students might say, hey, there's a question. Here's what the question is. We've also encouraged students that are coming in class to share their, to bring in their device and join the Zoom right in class, because then they can participate in the chat discussion with the remote students, and you're somewhat blending the face-to-face and remote students in somewhat of a similar environment. So if you wanted to try it out, I can just say, you know, hello all. You should have got a message in your chat. You can see that pop up. You'll notice that in your chat, you have a few other extra options. There is an everyone, so I sent that to everyone. If you click that list, you can also do private chat. If you needed to send a quick message to an individual, you pick the individual in that list. It looks like I got a few private chats. That's awesome. And additionally, off to the right-hand side, you can share a file. So not really huge files, but files that you might need to pass on to a class. So the chat is a vector for being able to pass on quick things that you might need to pass along. To the right of that is one of the questions that was brought up by Marie in regard to sharing screen. So how do we share the screen? What is the implications of doing that? Aside from what we're seeing right now of just sharing a presentation, there is the ability to annotate. There's the ability to share what is happening on a screen in real time. So if you have a program demonstration that you need to do, you can share that screen. And you can play a video and share that video. Now, the copyright implications of that are always in a gray area. If you think about it from an instructor perspective, you think about the Teach Act, you look at how copyright law is set up, it's every instance takes a very specific way that you would look at if you would be sued or if you would probably be able to make a good case as to if it's copyright law. If you went into Netflix and showed an entire movie to your class, you better have really good reason as to why we would have to show an entire movie by streaming and how it would relate to every aspect of your class. I would have a hard time thinking that we could defend that. But if you were to have a clip of a short video, or you went to YouTube and you streamed something that was already on the web, you're gonna have a lot more time if we were ever even to get into any litigation in that regard. So just keep that in mind, that I can't give you carte blanche just to go and put any kind of video streaming in here, but it does have the capability to do that. And what I've typically seen is that you mute everyone, you put the video on, and leave chat open and people can chat with each other. So when you click that share button, it gets a little disorienting at first because it says, what do you want to share? You're like, well, my screen. You have your screen, you have your whiteboard, you have kind of a virtual version. If you have a phone with you that's connected, you can share your phone screen. I haven't even played with that one yet, to be honest with you. You can also share an application screen only. So let's say that you had a program that you're running and you had a bunch of stuff on your desktop that you just didn't want somebody to see. You can just share that window, and only the things that are in that application that are open is what's being shared. So you have a lot of options. In my case, I typically just share the screen. It's seemingly the easiest thing for me to do. I can kind of get to all the various areas and go from there. But once you get into a screen share, it's going to look something like this. This is just a desktop background. I have it up at the top. I have this little green bar that will, and this little menu would hide. That's the typical navigation that we've had before. It flipped from the bottom to the top for me. Some people recondition it, put it back to the bottom. They put it to different areas. There's different ways that you can position that. But what I wanted to do right now is, since we're in a share screen mode, if you go to your, I think that says like view options or something around the word annotate that you should find in your menu. That's because I'm sharing a screen right now. So look for your screen and click on a thing that says annotate. When you do that, you should see a little window or something that will show up with some options for a mouse, a select, a text, a draw, some of those different options. And what you can do is you can draw on the screen. Anybody can draw on the screen right now as well. If you found that annotate button, you can go ahead and try to click on the draw button that's at the top and try drawing on the screen. Anybody found it? I see hola. Great. So somebody has found the annotate. So what you're able to do is right now we're just drawing on a picture of Machu Picchu. But what we would want to do is maybe use it in different ways. You could have a picture of maybe the skeletal structure and you're having people label things. You could have a map where you're circling certain areas. You can have certain teams going in with different colors to label certain regions. You can have a grid that you've set up in like a Word document and had groups fill in different pieces across the board. So there's a lot of implications of how you might leverage this across the board. I see little arrows going around. I see Grant kind of poking around up at the top there. So the annotation feature is really helpful. Not only is that, you can save the drawings and you can clear the drawings as you go. If you want to save this and give it to people a little bit later, you're just going to have to remember to hit the save button as you go forward. I'm going to go ahead and stop the annotation. I'm going to clear all the drawings and we'll continue moving on. So as you can see, I was able to write on that screen. So that's just an example of what we already did. Any questions on the annotation? That's always one that kind of brings up a couple questions. Seemed like it was.
I have a quick question. Is this something that you can send the screen to each individual student, have them annotate it, and then submit it back to you?
Not to that level, but what I would look into is Nearpod. Denise Henry is a really good resource for kind of that engagement. I think of annotation as a more so ad hoc kind of way to create a quick engaging lesson with your students. But as far as being to submit things back on a regular cadence, it would be really difficult to manage. But think about everyone converging on a single screen together. That's where you can break people into groups and say, group 1, everyone's blue. Group 2, everyone's yellow. And then that way you can kind of differentiate with color values.
Okay.
So recording is a question that comes up, because if you are in a synchronous session where you have people that are maybe remote, people that are in class, sometimes the remote people may have a technical issue or they can't get into the session on time. There's a slew of things that could happen. The best practice is to record your session if you feel like the information that you're giving at that moment needs to be recorded and shared with others. There's been discussion of a few faculty members that are doing hybrid style courses, but they're not going to be using Zoom. They'll record a video and post that in Blackboard, and they're using whatever tools that they're using to record that video, and then they just share that. And so the people that are off-site on that day are just going to Blackboard for the day. They're not showing up to a synchronous Zoom session. And then the people that are on site, that instructor is working with them very heavily on site. That next Thursday, those people that were face-to-face, they're now in Blackboard and they're doing the Blackboard exercise, and the other people are now back on site face-to-face. So there's a lot of ways to go ahead and move forward with the hybrid model. A lot of faculty are also thinking of, hey, I'm gonna be standing in a classroom, a couple people in front of me and a couple people remote. I'm gonna just hit record. At the end of the session, I'm gonna have it available in Blackboard. Right at this moment, you can only record locally, meaning that you record your file to your computer. So this recording that I'm happening is going to my machine. We are investigating, and we're pretty confident that we're gonna have live for fall an ability to just hit record. It's gonna record to the cloud, and then it's gonna become available in your class. So very minimal hands-on for the instructor. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for you. One of the caveats is that the online storage for those videos is very minimal. So we're looking at a duration time of potentially 15 days that recording would be available. But in that time frame, you would be able to download your recording. Students could download the recording as well if you allow them. And then you can then re-host it elsewhere. What we've been doing for these sessions is hosting these sessions back in YouTube account and putting them as unlisted, and then putting them right back in Blackboard as an embedded file. We just feel that keeping it local is not hitting that space, and we're not going to tap it out. But there will be more to come on how that Blackboard piece works. Because we're in the midst of a migration in Blackboard, I cannot integrate it until we migrate to the new system.
So does this mean that we could not, or maybe we can, record a short video in Zoom, say 30 seconds, and then load that up to Blackboard?
Yeah, so anything that you record, so let me clarify this. Like, record for an hour, we're fine with it. Do the full session recording, and it's going to just show up as a link that's watchable and downloadable by you. That link will only exist for 15 days. So you have a 15-day window to download your file, download whatever the size of that's going to be. If we're starting to see that we're hitting a cap, we're going to go and ask leadership what kind of funding we have to increase the threshold that we have there. Based off our calculations, like right now, we haven't even implemented that feature, and there's a few people that do have it, and we're at like over 67% utilization of our space. So we're going to have to look at the purge cycle happening, but we feel like a 15-day window will give you a student 2 weeks to be able to engage with that content, and you still have the ability to download your entire session, and you can upload it to YouTube, which has pretty much infinite kind of space, so to speak. There's just a few tips on how you might upload it there. One thing that we're not uploading these into Blackboard. The MP4 files should not ever be loaded directly to Blackboard. When you create a video file, you're creating a file that should be hosted on a video streaming service, and Blackboard is not that. So the issue that you're going to have is really poor playback. Some people are going to have to download that file and have a player on their machine, where if you put it on YouTube, YouTube does all the encoding, all the work, and then they're able to watch it right in the browser, and you can embed it into a lot of different pieces in your class. It's one of the best ways to do it. One of the things that YouTube does, just so you're aware, is when you upload your video, it creates probably 10 to 20 versions of your video. So if you're in a really bad area in terms of service, it will deliver you the low bandwidth version of your video, so it's technically still watchable on a very low bandwidth service, versus if you have a really high end speed bandwidth, it's going to show you the full HD version of your video. So it does all this back end work to be able to deliver the video at the most consistent way to the end user. So that's a little sidebar on how YouTube looks at video. So moving along, let's talk about breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are one of the tools that most people get excited about, because the breakout rooms allow you to separate your Zoom call into a bunch of different little groups. So those groups typically will have a task at hand. What I've done in my breakout sessions, we technically have enough to do 2 breakout sessions in this one if we wanted to try it, and if we have time we can try that out at the end. But what happens is you have to, well, everyone's in the session, you say, okay, we're going to put everyone in groups. You can assign the groups beforehand, or you can automatically assign it based off the room size. You can say how many people should be in a group. There's a lot of different ways that you can adjust what's going to happen. Here's an example of saying, how many participants are in the call? How many rooms do you want to create? It's going to give you some of that criteria. You are probably not seeing breakout rooms on your navigation because you are participants. So participants wouldn't have the button. But what's cool about this, and this screenshot kind of shows it, is that I usually say, okay, everyone, we're going to do some breakout session. In your groups, when you get into your group, pick somebody who's the recorder and presenter. And then you just have all the groups with the task. Go talk about this subject. Go talk about this subject. And we're going to split you into groups, and then we're going to pull everyone back in 10 minutes. We're going to do a round robin and then report out what we found in our group session. That's a typical kind of example of how you might leverage it. You, as the instructor, as the host, you get to bounce around between the various groups. So you can't obviously be in all of them at once, but you can kind of peek your head in, help direct the conversation as needed, and then jump out, get into another group, continue that going along. After a certain duration of time, it's based on your settings. Like on this one, it says breakout rooms would close automatically after 30 minutes. Usually my breakout rooms are about 15 minutes. I find that's a really good amount of time before the conversation really disintegrates, depending on what kind of expectations I give them as to what their task may be. After that time period, a countdown pops on the screen. It'll say, all right, you have 60 seconds and you're getting all pulled back in the room. And everyone usually is like, okay, who's the recorder again? Who's going to do their thing? La, 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 la. And then everyone gets pulled out. the host is able to, you know, go back in the room and we all start sharing out what we learned. That is a really great way to engage a session of people. It gets a little bit more difficult if you have face-to-face and remote users in the same room, because you're going to have these groups that get created that might be online and then face-to-face, and it's not really integrated with everyone in the class, but it's still available. So we kind of talked about reactions. There's a reaction button that's at the bottom of your nav bar. There's two simple reactions, the clapping and the thumbs up. That's just a nonverbal cue that you can let somebody know they've done a good job, they've done a thumbs up. It's usually used by participants when you're having a share out with a lot more people. So if you're doing a round robin with students and they're doing presentations every 5 minutes, all the other students will do a clap with the icon or whatnot. This is an example of a waiting room. So what you're seeing on the screen in the upper right-hand corner is you see that Denise would be in my waiting room. So I'm just sitting here. What I failed to do when I did the screenshot is highlight her name, but if I were to do that, a little button would appear that says admit. So I could admit just her, or when I highlighted her name, there's something that says admit all. So for instance, at the beginning of this meeting, Marie and Suzanne were both in the call, and I just hit admit all and you both came in. So once you allow somebody in, they pop in the call just like normal. Everyone's able to kind of see each other. And then I, you know, explain the nonverbal communication. And then this is just an example of Denise, you know, showing her instance of what it looked like on the nonverbal communication. So one of the important areas just to be aware of is the video settings. Video settings is going to be something that you can even play with on your side. As you can tell right now, it looks like I'm sitting in some studio apartment somewhere. I'm actually in my home. I'm just hanging out right now. So one of the things, I'm going to minimize my screen for just a second so I can get to my settings. So I can kind of go anywhere. I may want to go to a castle. So I'm in front of a castle at the moment. There's a virtual backgrounds that I can set up, or I'm going to sit in this lobby of this nice office or wherever I might be. So there's a lot of ways that you can use what are called virtual backgrounds just to kind of dress up your background environment. This is typically what my house looks like right now. So I'm just sitting in my house like anybody else might be. I tend to throw these backgrounds on there for just to give it a little bit of a visual appeal. But those are in that virtual background. But that really wasn't what I wanted to talk to you too much about. It was more specific on, let me go one forward, is the tools that are underneath this in the video. So there's a button that says Enable HD. If you have an HD webcam, it's going to give you a little bit more real estate, a little crisper picture. A little bit below that is the one I really want to just tell everyone about. That's the Mirror My Video. So you can all do this right now, actually, if you're on the video, is if you go into your settings of your video and you navigate to video, just click on Mirror Video and you'll see how it looks. So essentially it's making your video like it's a mirror. To everyone else, you're going to just look completely normal. But to yourself, you're a mirror. Why would I bring that up? Well, when you're using a dock camera in the classroom, you're going to be projecting that dock camera to everyone in the classroom. And so if you have it mirrored, everything's going to be backwards. So you got to make sure that you turn your mirror off. And that is where you do that. It's just something I'm going to point to everyone that and I don't care if you have it on or off, and that's up to your preference when you're out on video, but you will have to toggle that if you're going to use that dock cam. I already showed you the virtual backgrounds. You click that. Not everyone can use virtual backgrounds by chance. Depending on your computer's ability to process some of the imagery, it may require that you have a green screen. But typically, if you go to those virtual backgrounds, there is a little plus button, or there may be some preloaded backgrounds that you can click on. So if you want to give that a go and see if your computer can handle it, it may swap out your background for a virtual background.
Can you upload your own?
Yes, you can. You can put your own thing. And actually, one of the things that I had been doing as well is, if you know what my office looks like, I have my virtual office right here. So if you know me and if you've met me before, it looks like I'm sitting in my office, and I've tricked a few people. So I've just taken my camera, put it in my office, and clicked my backdrop. So very handy tool to be able to adjust that background. right, and then that would be the end of the session. So when you end a session, and I'm not going to end this right this second, I'm just telling you that we're close to Q&A, is when you end a session, there's a leave button. And if you are the host, that you will be able to click on that button and it will have an end meeting for all or leave meeting. And before I go too much into it, I just want to give Marie a heads up. So Marie, what's looking like happening with your background is yours may require a green screen. And because you may not have a green screen, what it's trying to do is find a uniform color, and it's going to just overlay that on there. So if you had a more consistent colored background, for instance, like a white or a gray sheet or something like that, you may have a little bit better success with it when you have that I have a green screen box checked. But looking pretty close there, so it was good. But going back into leaving the meeting, let's say you got into a really great discussion and you had 5 students that you left in the class and you have to bail, you have to go somewhere else. You're not ready to just disrupt that discussion. You can leave the meeting and it's going to auto-associate one of those people with a host privileges. You could assign somebody as host, or you can just leave and it auto does it. What it will, and it keeps the meeting open. If you hit end meeting for all, cuts the meeting, everyone's kicked out, meeting's over. One thing to be aware though, is if you leave the meeting, you're kind of giving up your host privileges for a second. But if you're trying to start a completely different Zoom meeting, it will not allow you until you close this meeting. It's not a problem for you. You just log into your account. You can end any meeting you want to. You can join any meeting that you've set up for yourself. So you would just join your meeting and you might tell everyone, hey guys, I got to close this meeting. It's done. You've been going for 3 hours here or wherever that might be. You can close that out and end that meeting. So this is just some information. This is my information now that you can email me direct. Typically though, you want to submit any tickets or insights through our help desk. You can go directly to our website to do that. Call our help desk at the 549-2002. They'll be able to queue this up and get you set up.